Honey, I didn't forget. Your mommy told me last week not to give you gifts from our side anymore. She said you don't deserve them. My sister Cordelia said that to my 8-year-old daughter at her own birthday party, in front of 14 people, while my mother stood 3 feet away holding napkins. The lie was a sentence I had never spoken. The gift was a gift Cordelia had never bought. The shame was supposed to land on me. I did not raise my voice. I did not stand. I lifted Lisa onto my lap. I let her finish blowing out her candles. I drove 5 hours home. My mother heard every word. 3 weeks later, she left a voicemail. My daughter found it 8 months after that, saved it, told no one. She waited an entire year. Then at her own 9th birthday, she pressed play. If this story is already sitting on your chest, please take a second to like the video and subscribe. It helps me keep telling stories like this one, exactly the way they happened. And drop your city and your local time in the comments. I love knowing where in the world you're listening from. I'm Martha. I'm 37. And this is the story of the voicemail my 8-year-old daughter saved in secret. To understand it, we have to go back to last September, to a colonial dining room in New Haven that I should have stopped walking into a long time ago. I'm a hospice music therapist. That means I sit at the bedside of people who are dying, and I play music for them. Sometimes I sing the songs their husbands sang to them on a porch in 1968. Sometimes I just hold a guitar across my lap and let a man breathe in time with a chord. I have been doing this work for 11 years at Sinai Hospital in Baltimore. And the most important thing the work has taught me is this: the more pain a person carries, the shorter their sentences become. The brave ones do not narrate. They name one thing. Then they breathe. I think that is also how I parent. My husband is Mark Halberg. He's a civil engineer. He designs the rebar in the long concrete piers under the Port of Baltimore, and he sleeps 8 hours a night without dreaming. We have lived in a brick townhouse in Mount Washington for 9 years. We have 2 children, Lisa Halberg, who was born in September of 2016, and Noah, who arrived 3 years later. Lisa plays piano. Noah loves dinosaurs. I was raised in Connecticut. My mother is Constance Halberg Briggs. My father is Howard. They live in the same colonial house on a wide, quiet street in the Westville neighborhood of New Haven that they bought in 1978. My mother was a bookkeeper for 35 years at an accounting firm 2 blocks from the Green. My father sold insurance. Their friends still own the houses on either side of theirs. They have not moved in 45 years, and they do not understand any kind of woman who does. I left for Maryland in 2014, the day I graduated from Towson University with a master's in music therapy. I had been offered a position at Sinai. I took it. I did not move back to Connecticut. My mother never said the word abandonment out loud, but the word lived in every Christmas she sent me a card signed Mom instead of Love, Mom. I knew the difference. I always have. My older sister Cordelia stayed. Cordelia is 42 now, 5 years older than me, and she has been living back in our parents' house for the last 4 years. She had a wedding in 2018, paid for almost entirely by our mother, married a software engineer named Bradford Vance, divorced him in 2021 and brought her 2 children home to my mother's guest rooms, with the explanation that she was there to take care of our aging parents. My mother's 71 and reads 2 newspapers a day. My father is 73 and still drives himself to the eye doctor. They do not need care. They need a younger person in the house to fold the laundry. And Cordelia, who works part-time selling Connecticut real estate that mostly does not sell, was happy to oblige. Cordelia has 2 children. Olivia Vance is 17, a senior in high school, and she was accepted early to Brown University in December of 2024. Trevor Vance is 15 and the kind of teenage boy who stares at his phone through dinner. My parents have been writing tuition checks for college visits, prep tutors, and now Brown's first installment for almost a decade. They have never in 9 years bought my daughter a gift they picked out themselves. This was the situation in early September of 2024, when my mother called me at the end of a workday and said, "Martha, your sister wants to throw Lisi's 8th birthday at our house this year. For tradition." She paused. "You should come. Licia is at the age." She hung up before I could answer. I sat at my kitchen counter holding the phone for a long time. I had been to my parents' house exactly twice in the previous 3 years. Both times had been Christmas, and both times Cordelia's children had received 4 wrapped gifts each from my mother, and Lisi had received a candy cane. Mark came home. He listened. He said, "Martha, give her one more chance. Give the kids one more chance. If it's bad, we leave." I said yes. I always said yes in those years, because saying no felt like proving my mother right. That was my first mistake. We drove up on the morning of Saturday, September 14th, 2024. The leaves were already turning along E95. Lisa was in the back seat, wearing a blue corduroy dress she had picked out herself, with a yellow hair ribbon, and she had drawn a small fish in pen on the back of her right hand because, she said, fish are good luck for birthdays. Noah was 5 and asleep. We pulled into my parents' gravel driveway at 3 in the afternoon. My mother was standing on the porch with a tray of folded white napkins, watching the road. She did not come down the steps. She nodded. Cordelia was already inside, in the kitchen, opening a bottle of Chardonnay. She was wearing a long cream sweater and pearl earrings. She kissed me on the cheek without looking at me. She said, "We've got 14 people coming. I think it'll be lovely. Don't worry about anything." I should have asked what she meant by that. I didn't. The party itself was small but full. Aunt Coretta, my mother's older sister, drove down from Hartford with her son Louis. Edith Patterson and Faye Mercer, my mother's 2 oldest friends, came in matching navy cardigans. Earl and Geraldine Pomeroy from across the street brought a bouquet of yellow roses. Dale and Geneva Norwood, who had worked with my father at the insurance office for 30 years, arrived with a card. My parents were there. Cordelia, Olivia, Trevor, my family of 4. 14 total. There were 6 gifts on the side table when we arrived. 5 of them were from people who were not Cordelia or my parents. The 6th was a small tin of pretzels with a sticky note on top in my mother's handwriting that said, "For Liz, from Grandma and Grandpa. Happy birthday." That was what the people in this house considered an appropriate gift for the granddaughter who lived 5 hours away. I did not say a word. Lisa opened the presents at 5 o'clock in the formal dining room, sitting on a tall chair we had pulled up beside the table. The chair was upholstered in pale gold silk. She looked very small in it. She opened the gifts the way my mother taught me to open gifts at her age, hands flat on the wrapping paper, no tearing, quiet thank yous. She got to the end of the gift table, and then she looked up at the rest of the room, the way an 8-year-old does when she's still hoping there's one more. And she said, "Aunt Cordelia, did you forget mine?" She said it gently. She said it the way she'd been raised to say things. Aunt Cordelia. Cordelia stood up from her chair at the foot of the table. She set down her wine glass. She smiled the smile she had been wearing all afternoon, the one for guests. And she said loudly enough that every person in that dining room could hear, "Honey, I didn't forget. Your mommy told me last week not to give you gifts from our side anymore. She said you don't deserve them." The dining room went still. I counted 6 seconds. I know it was 6 because I counted them. I counted because I needed something to do with my hands, besides hit my sister in the face, in front of 14 people, in front of my mother, in front of my child. Lisa did not look at Cordelia. She looked at me. She did not cry. Her chin moved once, the way an 8-year-old's chin moves when she has decided she will not cry in this room on this day ever. I did not stand. I did not raise my voice. I did not contradict. I reached across the corner of the table, and I lifted my daughter off the gold chair and I placed her on my lap. I said, low and only to her, "We have your cake at home, baby. We can have 2 cakes." She nodded once. She did not look at her aunt. She did not look at her grandmother. She looked at the napkin in her own hand and folded it into a triangle. The cake came out. Cordelia carried it. Cordelia smiled. Cordelia sang. My mother sang. Lisa blew out the 8 candles in one breath, the way she had practiced in our kitchen the night before. We had cake. I made polite conversation with Aunt Coretta about her hip surgery. I did not look at my sister. I did not look at my mother. We left at 6:30. In my peripheral vision, on the way out the front door, I saw my mother standing in the doorway between the dining room and the kitchen, still holding the tray of unused napkins from earlier. She had not moved. She was looking at Cordelia. Her face was very flat. I closed the door behind me. I strapped Lise into the back seat. I told her she could pick the music. She picked the Vince Guaraldi Christmas album, which was wrong for September. But the song she wanted was the slow piano one with the bass walking in the background. We drove south on I-95 for 5 hours. Mark drove, Noah slept, Lisi slept, and then woke up around Wilmington and said very quietly into the dark of the back seat, "Mommy, did you tell them not to give me a gift?" I turned around. She was looking out the side window with her cheek against the glass. I said, "No, baby, I did not. Your aunt is wrong about that." She nodded once. She said, "Okay." She put her hand back on her cheek and she fell asleep again before we hit the bridge. We pulled into our driveway in Mount Washington at midnight. I carried Lisi in. I tucked her into her bed. I went out onto our small back balcony in the warm September air. and I sat in a wicker chair, and I did not cry. Mark came out and sat next to me. He did not speak. After a long time, he said, "What are we going to do?" I said, "Nothing." He said, "Martha." I said, "I am not going to argue with her, Mark. I'm not going to call my mother and demand an apology she will not give. I am not going to teach my daughter that the way to handle a lie is to scream back. I'm going to be still. I am going to be exactly the kind of still that woman in there knows how to be. And I am going to wait." He said, "Wait for what?" I said, "For the truth to grow up and find its own way out." He took my hand. He did not let go for an hour. If you have ever been blamed for the coldness of the person who chose to be cold, drop one yellow heart in the comments below. Just one. So I know I am not the only one sitting in the dark, thinking about a child who counted to 6. I will read every single one tonight. I did not contact my mother. I did not contact my sister. I went to work that Monday. I sat next to a man dying of pancreatic cancer named George, who had eyes the same color as my father's, and I played the slow part of Moon River while he slept. Lisa went to school. Noah went to school. Mark put on his hard hat and went to the harbor. 3 weeks went by. On the night of October 3rd, 2024, I had just tucked Noah into bed, and I was washing the cereal bowls Lisa had left in the sink, and my phone rang on the counter. The screen said, "Mom." I let it ring. It had been 21 days. I was tired. I did not want my mother's voice in my house at the end of a long day. The call went to voicemail. A minute later, the voicemail notification arrived. I dried my hands. I put my AirPods in. I leaned against the kitchen counter under the soft pendant light that Mark had installed crookedly 2 years ago, and I pressed play. My mother does not waste time when she leaves a message. She does not say hello. She does not ask how you are. She begins, "Daughter, this is your mother. I am not calling to apologize for anything I have not done." I held very still. "But your sister Cordelia told your daughter at her own birthday party, in front of 14 people, that you ordered her not to give Lisa a gift because Lisa doesn't deserve them. You never said that. Cordelia invented it on the spot." I slid down the front of the cabinet. I sat on the floor. I held the bowl I had been drying in my lap. The phone kept playing. She was wearing a cream sweater. She had a wine glass in her left hand. "Lisa looked at you, not at her. She was very brave. She did not cry. You also did not cry, which I noticed. You picked her up. You sat her on your lap. You folded her into yourself the way a mother folds in laundry. And I watched you, and I thought, my daughter has become a better mother than I was. I have not been able to stop seeing that picture since you left." I put my hand over my mouth. On Saturday afternoon, at approximately 1:15 p.m., you and I spoke on the telephone for 4 minutes. You asked me one question. You asked, quote, "Mom, do you want me to bring anything Sunday?" That is the only sentence you said about food or gifts to me in that entire conversation. I have it in my notes because I write down our calls. You did not say anything about Cordelia. You did not say anything about Lisa not deserving gifts. You did not tell anyone in this house what you wanted them to do or not do for your child. Cordelia made that up in front of 14 people. She paused. She breathed. I have not been a warm grandmother to your children. I have made that choice. The reason is mine. The reason is your move to Maryland 11 years ago. The reason is that I held a grudge longer than your father is willing to live with. The reason is mine. I am not asking you to forgive me. I am not asking you to come back here. I will not be at your daughter's piano recital next spring. I will not call Noah on his birthday. I am too old and too tired to change the kind of grandmother I am. My hands were shaking, but what your sister did at that table tonight, she did with my name in her mouth. She used my coldness as her shield. She told an 8-year-old that her own mother had ordered cruelty. I will not have it. I am calling to tell you on this voicemail in my own words that the distance from your children is mine to own, and your sister's lie about you is hers to answer for. And my granddaughter deserves to know which is which. End of message. The voicemail clicked. I sat on the kitchen floor for 40 minutes. I played it twice more. I cried only on the third listen. And I cried only for 90 seconds. And then I stopped. Because Lisi was going to wake up to use the bathroom at any moment, and I did not want her to see me on the floor. I forwarded the audio file to Mark by message at 1 a.m. He listened to it in his truck the next morning on the way to the harbor. He called me from the parking lot at the construction site. He said, "Martha, don't delete it." I said, "I won't." He said, "Don't reply yet. Don't call her back. Sit on this for a while." I said, "I wasn't going to call her back." I didn't. For 3 months, I did not call my mother. I did not call my sister. I went to George's funeral on the 2nd of November. I sat in the back row of the chapel at the cemetery in Catonsville, and his wife Linda walked over and hugged me and said, "He asked for you twice the night he died. I just sang the chords. He told me you played Moon River for him at the right tempo, the slow one, and that was the night he stopped being afraid. He said you taught him how to listen." I held her hand for a long time. I did not cry there either. I have not cried often that year. I bought Lisa a new pair of school shoes. I made stuffing for our own Thanksgiving in our own kitchen with my own husband and my own 2 children. And Mark and I had a long, quiet morning in our pajamas before anyone woke up. And I forgot for hours at a time that the voicemail existed. I burned the toast on the morning of Thanksgiving, and the smell stayed in the kitchen until the next day. Noah ate 2 helpings of mashed potato. Lisa ate the cranberry sauce I had made from scratch and asked for seconds. We sat on the floor of the living room after dinner and watched a movie about a dog. Nobody mentioned the word grandmother, but it existed. The voicemail. It was sitting on my phone like a small stone in a river. I would not be the one to play it. Lisa would. It happened on a Sunday morning in January, the 18th of January, 2025, if I'm being precise. And I am because Lisi's piano lesson was Monday, and her teacher had asked her to start working on Debussy's Clair de Lune, and Lise, 8 years old, asked to borrow my phone so she could find the YouTube video by Katya Bunyatishvili that she likes. I said, "Of course, baby, it's on the kitchen counter." She took the phone. She sat on her bed cross-legged with her stuffed otter in her lap. She opened the phone the way I had taught her, with the passcode 4319, which is the birthday of my long-dead grandfather. and the only passcode I have ever used. She did not go straight to YouTube. She told me this much later. She told me that the home screen of my phone had 3 notifications on it that morning. A reminder to renew my AAA membership, a weather alert for the Patapsco River, and, underneath, a small gray icon she did not recognize, a circle with a phone receiver inside it. Below it, the word voicemail. Below that, a red dot with the number 1. She tapped it. She is 8 years old. She wanted to know what a voicemail was. She wanted to know what the red dot meant. She wanted, the way she always wants, to know one more thing than anyone has bothered to tell her. The voicemail folder opened. There was 1 item in it. The contact name read Mom. The date read October 3rd, 2024. The duration read 5 minutes and 12 seconds. There was a small play button. She pressed it. She listened to the whole thing alone, in her bedroom on a Sunday morning, while the radiator hissed, and a cardinal sat on the bird feeder outside her window. I was in the kitchen making waffles. Mark was reading the newspaper. Noah was on the floor of the living room with a plastic triceratops. I did not know any of this was happening. Lisa came out of her room 20 minutes later. She was wearing her pajamas. She put my phone back on the kitchen counter, screen side down. She walked over to the kitchen table, and she sat down in her usual chair. And she said, "Mommy, do you and Grandma talk?" I was pouring batter. I said, "Not much, baby." "Why?" She looked at the syrup. She said, "Just wondering." I set down the ladle. I said, "Is everything okay?" She nodded. She said, "Can I have 2 waffles?" I gave her 2 waffles. She poured the syrup herself. She ate slowly and neatly, and she finished her milk. And then she got down from her chair, and she went back to her bedroom, and she shut the door. And she did not come out for 90 minutes. I thought she was sad about something at school. I let her be. By Sunday afternoon, she was back to normal. She practiced piano. She did her math homework. She let Noah brush her hair too hard. She kissed me goodnight. She did not tell me what she had heard. She has since told me, calmly, sitting on our back balcony 9 months later with a cup of warm milk in her hands and the late summer crickets going under us, what she did in her bedroom that morning. She had a tablet, an old iPad we had handed down to her when Mark upgraded his. She had a pair of headphones with a small white adapter that fit into the headphone jack. She had a voice memos app that she had used once before, in 2nd grade, to record herself reading a chapter book out loud as practice. She figured out alone that she could play the voicemail on my phone with the speaker turned up and place her tablet next to it and record the audio with voice memos. She did it once. She listened. The recording was clean. She named the file. She named it Grandma's Letter. She moved the file into a folder titled Piano Music, which she filled with 3 other piano recordings so that the folder would look the way a piano folder is supposed to look. She buried her grandmother's voice between Katia Bunyadishvili and Yo-Yo Ma. She told no one. She did not tell me. She did not tell Mark. She did not tell Noah. She did not tell her best friend Hattie at school. She did not tell her piano teacher, Mrs. Lindgren, who has been giving her Sunday lessons since Licia was 6. She did not tell the school counselor she sees once a month. She did not tell the woman at the library who runs the second grade reading club. She did not tell her own otter, the small stuffed one she has slept with since she was 2. She just put a green folder on a hand-me-down iPad and walked back into the kitchen and asked for 2 waffles. She slept with a tablet under her pillow for the next 4 months, and then she slept with it in the corner of her bed under a knit blanket for the 4 months after that. She did not delete it. She did not play it again. Not once that I know of. Until she pressed it on her own birthday in September of 2025. She told me afterward that she would touch the screen with 2 fingers some nights to make sure it was still there, the way I have watched dying patients press their thumb to the inside of their own wrist to make sure they still have a pulse. She did not need to hear it again. She needed to know it was still there. What did she do with what she heard? She did something I do not even now fully know how to write down. She started returning gifts. The first one came in the mail around the 2nd of January. Cordelia had mailed it from New Haven to Baltimore at Christmas, addressed to Lisa Halberg, care of our address. It was a Disney coloring book and a box of 12 thin colored pencils. Lisa opened it on Christmas morning, looked at the pencils, looked at the book, and said, "Thank you, Mommy and Daddy, and thank you to Aunt Cordelia." We made her write a note to her aunt. She wrote it in her neat brown handwriting. We mailed it. 3 weeks after the voicemail, on a Tuesday afternoon in mid-January when I was at work, Lisa came home from school and put her backpack on the kitchen table, and she said to Mark, who was working from home, "Daddy, I need to mail something. Can you take me to the post office?" Mark said, "Sure, baby. What are you mailing?" She held up the coloring book and the box of pencils, both rewrapped in brown paper, with a small, sticky note on the front of the package in her careful kindergarten teacher print. The sticky note read, "Return, Lisa." Mark looked at her for a long time. He looked at the package. He looked at her again. He said, "Lise, who is this for?" She said, "Aunt Cordelia, can we go now?" Mark said, "Why are you returning the coloring book? You liked it." Lisa said, "I changed my mind." Mark drove her to the post office. He paid the postage himself. He did not tell me about it for 9 months. He told me later that he had thought about saying no, and that he had thought about asking her again, and that he had looked at her face in the passenger seat as he buckled her in. And the face she had on was the face she had on at the dining room table in New Haven the previous September, when she had asked her aunt if she had forgotten her gift. He told me that face was not a face he was willing to overrule. It came back to Cordelia's mailbox in New Haven on January 28th. Easter came. Cordelia, who never sent a thing at Easter in her life, sent Lisey a wicker basket of chocolate rabbits and a small white plush bunny on April 20th, 2025. The card said, "Love, Aunt Cordelia." Liz opened it at the kitchen table. She thanked us. She ate one of the chocolate rabbits. She put the rest back in the basket. 3 days later, she came to Mark with the basket rewrapped in brown paper, with a sticky note on top that said, "Return, Lisa," and asked him if he could take her to the post office again. Mark took her. The basket came back to Cordelia on May 2nd. Mother's Day arrived. Cordelia sent a Hallmark card addressed to Constance, care of our address, with a separate little white envelope inside, addressed to Lisa, that contained 4 nice pencils with feather erasers and a card that said, "For my Lissa from Aunt Cordelia, Happy Spring." Lissa opened the inner envelope. She looked at the pencils. She held them in her hand for a long time. Then she walked across the kitchen, found the brown paper roll, rewrapped the 4 pencils, wrote her sticky note, and asked Mark, who was eating a sandwich, if he could mail it. She did not return the card addressed to my mother. She handed that one to me to mail myself. I mailed it. The 4th return was on August 30th, 2 weeks before her 9th birthday. Cordelia, who knew Lissa's birthday was September 13th, had sent an early gift. It was a thin paperback book titled Be the Sunshine Kid, with a yellow cover and an illustration of a smiling cartoon child with sunglasses. Lisa opened the package on the kitchen counter, looked at the title, looked at me, looked back at the title and said, "I don't think I want this one." I said, "What do you want to do with it?" She said, "Can Daddy take me to the post office?" That was the first time she let me see her doing it. I watched Mark drive away from the house with my 8-year-old daughter in the passenger seat, holding a small package wrapped in brown paper with a sticky note on top that I could read through the windshield. Return. Lissy. I sat at the kitchen table and I cried for the first time in 7 months. I did not know about the first 3 returns. I learned about all 4 of them, in order, on the night of August 31st, from a 17-year-old girl named Olivia, who called me on FaceTime from a bathroom in a colonial house in New Haven, holding a stack of 4 small parcels in her lap. She said, "Aunt Martha, I think I need to ask you something." I said, "Olivia, hi, are you okay?" She said, "Why does Lisa return my mom's gifts?" I said, "What?" She said, "I found these in my mom's closet. They were in a box under her shoes. They have her handwriting on them. Lisa's." She held a sticky note up to the screen. "Return. Licia." I sat down on my kitchen floor. I said, "Olivia, can I call you back?" She said, "Yes." I called her back 40 minutes later, after I'd sat on the floor of my kitchen and pressed my palms flat against the cool tile and made myself breathe the way I have spent 11 years teaching dying men to breathe. I said, "Olivia, thank you for calling me. I want to ask you something." She said, "Okay." I said, "Are you safe with your mother?" She was quiet. She said, "Yes, I am safe. She just lies a lot. About everybody. About Aunt Martha, most of all." I said, "I am going to ask you to do something hard. Can you keep those 4 packages somewhere safe? Don't tell your mom you found them. Don't tell Grandma either. Just keep them safe for me for 1 more week. Can you do that?" She said, "Yes." I said, "Why did you call me, baby?" She said, "Because she told me at my graduation party last spring that you said you wouldn't come because Grandma told you not to. And Grandma told me last month that she invited you. And it didn't add up, so I started watching." I said, "Olivia, you are not your mother. You will never be your mother. I am so glad you called me." She cried. She is 17. And she cried into the screen of her phone for a long time, alone in a bathroom, in a house I had not been inside in 3 years. When she stopped, she said, "Aunt Martha, what are you going to do?" I said, "I think I'm going to ask Grandma to host Lisa's 9th birthday party at her house this year, and I think I am going to bring my daughter to her own party. And I think your grandmother is going to bake the cake. Olivia said, "Will my mom be there?" I said, "Yes, she will be there." Olivia said, "Okay." She paused. She said, "Aunt Martha, can I bring the packages?" I called my mother the next morning. I waited until 10 o'clock. I called her on the kitchen line because she does not answer her cell on Sunday mornings. She picked up on the second ring. I said, "Mom, it's Martha." There was a pause. She said, "Hello, Martha." I said, "Mom, I have a question. Would you be willing to host Lisa's 9th birthday at your house this year? On the 13th, Saturday." The line went quiet for 3 seconds. Then my mother said, "Yes, I will bake the cake." I said, "Mom." She said, "Lemon blueberry the way I used to, tell her." I said, "I will." She said, "Bring Mark. Bring Noah. Tell your daughter the cake will be ready at 6. I said, "Mom, Cordelia will be there." My mother said, "Of course she will. It is her parents' house, too." I said, "Mom, Lisa may want to play something." There was a long pause. My mother said, "Then she should play it." She hung up. Mark and I stayed up that night until 2 in the morning at the kitchen table. I told him about Olivia. I told him about my mother's lemon blueberry. I told him I had said yes. I told him I did not know if I had made a terrible decision. Mark said, "Martha, is this a good idea?" I said, "I do not know. But Lisa needs to face the room where it happened, and so do the people who watched it happen. The only way that voicemail is going to do its job is if it is played in that house. If we play it here, it's just an audio file. If we play it there, it is a fact in their living room. They have to live in that room afterward." Mark said, "What if it makes everything worse?" I said, "Then it makes it worse. But Lisa is the one who saved the file. Lisa is the one who returned the gifts. Lisa is asking. We do not refuse our daughter when she asks for the truth." Mark looked at me for a long time. He said, "Tell Lisa to bring the tablet." I said, "I won't have to tell her. She's been sleeping with it under her blanket for 9 months. I think she's known for a while." The next morning before school, Lisa came out onto our back balcony where I was drinking coffee. She had her tablet in her arms. She said, "Mommy, tomorrow when we go to Grandma's, can I have one thing at the party?" I said, "Yes, baby, what?" She said, "Just please don't take the tablet away." I said, "Okay." I should have asked her why. I knew why. I asked her nothing. I lifted her up onto my lap. She was 9 years old already, in her own head. She let me hold her for 1 whole minute. Then she went to get her backpack. We drove up to New Haven on Friday afternoon, the 12th of September. Mark, me, Lisa with the tablet in a small canvas bag on her lap. Noah with 3 plastic dinosaurs. We arrived at my parents' house just after 7 in the evening. The sky was peach. The big maple in the front yard had already begun to drop yellow leaves. My mother opened the door before I knocked. I had not seen her do that in 8 years. She looked at me. She looked at the tablet bag on Lisa's shoulder. She nodded once. She said, "Come in." My father was in the front hallway. He was wearing a soft gray cardigan. He looked at the children. He said, "Lisa, Noah." He did not hug them. He held the door wider for them to walk past. It was not warmth. It was at least acknowledgement. We had soup that night, tomato bisque and grilled cheese cut into triangles. My mother had put Lisa in the small bedroom that used to be mine, the room with the upright piano against the window. Lisa looked at the piano for a long time. My mother said, "It is still in tune. Your Aunt Coretta plays it sometimes." Lisa said, "Can I play it tonight?" My mother said, "Yes." Lise played the first 16 bars of Clair de Lune by Debussy. My mother stood in the doorway and listened without moving. The kitchen behind her was warm and lit and smelled of basil and butter. The dining room behind me was already half set for the next day, the white linen folded into a long, pale line down the center of the dark walnut table, the silver in 2 neat stacks waiting to be laid out. When Lisa finished the 16 bars, she lifted her hands off the keys without flourish and rested them on her thighs. My mother said, "You play it slower than your mother did. That is correct." Lisa said, "Thank you, Grandma." My mother said, "I am going to bake the cake before bed. Would you like to watch?" Lisa looked up at me. I nodded. She followed my mother into the kitchen. I sat at the dining room table by myself for 10 minutes and watched my own daughter, through the doorway, stand on a step stool beside her 71-year-old grandmother and pour blueberries from a wooden bowl into a glass measuring cup. Neither of them spoke unnecessarily. My mother handed Lisa the wooden spoon. Lisa folded the batter the way my mother had once taught me to fold batter when I was 9. She did not say anything more. I slept that night in my old guest room with Mark, with Noah on a small folding cot against the wall. I did not sleep well. I went down the hall twice to check on Lisi. Both times she was lying on her back with the tablet on her chest and her hand resting on top of it. Both times her eyes were open. The morning of Saturday the 13th was crisp and bright. My mother had laid out the dining room table at 8 in the morning. White linen, the good china with the small gold border. 14 place settings. She had baked the lemon blueberry cake by herself between 5 and 7 a.m., wearing a cotton apron that had not been used in a decade. The cake sat on the sideboard under a glass dome. Cordelia arrived at 2 in the afternoon. She wore a dark floral dress with a thin gold belt, bright red lipstick. She was carrying a single white envelope. No gift. She walked into the kitchen, kissed my mother on the cheek, said, "Mom, you look tired. You should have let me do this," and went to the bar cart to pour herself a glass of Chardonnay before she had even said hello to me. Olivia came in behind her. She was wearing a navy sweater and jeans. Over her shoulder was a large brown paper grocery bag, the handle wrapped twice around her wrist. She walked straight to me. She did not look at her mother. She said, "Aunt Martha, where do I put this?" I said, "Behind the buffet where the linens go. I'll come get it later." She said, "Okay." She set the bag down behind the buffet. She kissed Lisi on the top of the head. She sat next to Licio on the small love seat by the window and did not move for an hour. The other guests began arriving at 4. Aunt Coretta with Louis, Edith and Faye in matching navy cardigans, Earl and Geraldine Pomeroy with another bouquet of yellow roses, Dale and Geneva Norwood with a card. Trevor, who came in last, slumped onto a chair near the window with his phone. 14 people, same room, same girl, 1 year older. We sat down at 6. Cordelia took the foot of the table, the chair our mother used to sit in. She immediately began to tell Earl Pomeroy about Olivia's acceptance to Brown. She used the words early decision 3 times in 2 minutes. She did not look at Olivia. The chicken was served. The roasted potatoes were served. The salad, wine for the adults, lemonade for the children, sparkling water for my mother. Halfway through her plate, Lisa reached down to the small canvas bag at her feet, took out her tablet, set it carefully on the table beside her dinner plate, screen down. Cordelia, from across the table, called out, "Honey, no screens at the table." Lisa looked at her. She did not flinch. She said, "Just one thing, Aunt Cordelia." She turned her face to my mother, who was at the head of the table. She said, "Grandma, before cake, can we play your message?" My mother had been lifting a forkful of green beans. She set the fork down carefully on the rim of her plate. She looked at Lisa for 2 full seconds. She nodded once. She said, "Yes, you may, Lisa. Play it." Cordelia stood up. She said very fast, "Mom, why don't we skip the message and just bring the cake out now? I'll get the cake. My mother said, without looking at her, "Sit down, Cordelia." Cordelia did not sit down right away. My father, at the opposite head, set down his glass of red wine. He turned his head. He looked at his older daughter for the first time across that long table in years. He said very quietly, "Cordelia, sit." She sat. Lisi flipped the tablet face up. She tapped the green folder labeled piano music. She tapped the file titled Grandma's Letter. She pressed play. The room went silent in the way only a room with 14 people in it can go silent. The clink of forks stopped. Edith Patterson froze with her napkin halfway to her mouth. My mother's voice came out of the tablet, calm, precise, just over a year old. But it could have been recorded that morning. "Daughter, this is your mother. I am not calling to apologize for anything I have not done." Cordelia tried to laugh. It came out as a small, dry noise. "But your sister Cordelia told your daughter at her own birthday party, in front of 14 people, that you ordered her not to give Lisa a gift because Lisa doesn't deserve them. You never said that. Cordelia invented it on the spot." Cordelia stopped smiling. She stopped smiling before the second sentence had even finished. I watched her face the way you watch a glass of water tipping toward the edge of a counter. There was a freeze, then a slow correction, then a panic. The voicemail kept going. She was wearing a cream sweater. She had a wine glass in her left hand. Licia looked at her mother, not at her. She was very brave. She did not cry. You also did not cry, which I noticed. Cordelia opened her mouth. She said, Mom, you're confused. You said you don't remember conversations from last year. You said..." My mother turned her head slowly toward Cordelia. She said in a voice that did not raise even a quarter step, "I am 71 years old. I was a bookkeeper for 35 years. My memory is not confused. Listen." The voicemail kept playing. The room kept listening. My mother's recorded voice described the cream sweater, the wine glass in Cordelia's left hand, the exact words I had said in our one phone call on the Saturday afternoon before the birthday. "Mom, do you want me to bring anything Sunday?" It described what I had not said. It described the lie Cordelia had spoken into the room. It described, with the dry precision of a woman who had been an accountant longer than I had been alive, exactly how invented it had been. Edith Patterson set down her glass. Faye Mercer reached across the table and took Edith's hand. Louis, who had not eaten a bite of his chicken yet, leaned slowly back in his chair. Dale Norwood, who had worked 30 years selling insurance with my father, took off his glasses and laid them on the white tablecloth and rubbed his face once with his open palm. Geneva, his wife, lifted her napkin to her mouth and did not put it down again until the voicemail was over. When the voicemail finished, my mother stood up. She walked to the small writing desk against the wall. She opened the lower drawer. She pulled out a green, hardbound ledger, the kind she had used for 35 years of small businesses books. She walked back to the dining room table. She placed the ledger beside Cordelia's plate. She opened it to a marked page. She said 23 entries. April 19th, 2019, October 11th, 2020, December 8th, 2020, February 4th, 2021, March 21st, 2021. She continued reading. She read the dates and the dollar amounts. The total she added at the end of the page was $1,840. Cash you took from me to buy gifts for Lisa and Noah. You bought none. You kept the money. I noted every transaction. I did not say anything because I thought, that is your business. Until you used my granddaughter's birthday to make my coldness look like a lie I asked you to tell. Then it became my business. Cordelia stared at the ledger. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. Olivia stood up. She walked over to the buffet. She picked up the brown paper grocery bag she had set there, hours earlier. She walked back to the table. She unrolled the top of the bag. She reached inside, and she took out 4 small parcels, each one wrapped in brown paper, each one with a yellow sticky note on the top in a child's careful printing. Return, Lisi. She placed them in a row in front of her mother's plate. She said in the steady voice of a 17-year-old who has been waiting 1 full week to say this. Mom, I found these in your closet last week, under your shoes. Cordelia's hand came up to her mouth. She did not speak. There was a silence that lasted 8 seconds. I counted them. I counted them because something in me needed to do something with my hands, besides reach across the table and shake my sister. My father stood up. He looked across the table at Cordelia, his older daughter, the one he had let stay in his house rent-free for 4 years and write checks to herself for Brown tuition. And he said in a voice that none of us had heard him use since 2003, Cordelia, you used my name too. My. Cordelia turned her face to him. She said, What? He said, Last fall, at the country club brunch. You told Louis that I refused to pick Lisa up when she came to visit because Lisa, quote, smelled like medicine. Louis told me 3 weeks later, very gently, because he thought I should know. I never said that. I never thought that. I have never refused to pick up either of my granddaughters. I have been distant from them. That is mine. That sentence was yours. Cordelia broke. She stood up so fast her chair scraped. She shouted, loud enough that the lamp on the buffet rattled. I did everything for this family while she pointed at me, ran off to Maryland to play guitar for dying people. The silence after that sentence was the loudest thing I have ever heard in my parents' dining room. Edith Patterson very slowly set her fork down beside her plate. My mother stood at the head of the table with her hands flat on the green ledger. She looked at Cordelia. She said, with the same flat New England composure I had heard her use my entire childhood, "You will leave my house tonight. You will not come back until you write a letter to your niece in your own handwriting, apologizing for telling her at her own birthday party that her mother did not love her. You will give the letter to me first. I will decide if it is sufficient. Then I will give it to Lisi." Cordelia stared at her. She made one small sound. She picked up her purse. Trevor, 15, slid out of his chair and followed her without a word. The front door opened. The front door closed. Olivia did not move. She stayed in her chair beside Lisa, on the small love seat by the window where she had moved at 4 o'clock that afternoon. She put her arm around Lisa's shoulders. My mother turned to me. She looked across the table at Lisa, then back at me. She said, "Bring the cake. If you grew up being told a story about who you were by the person who needed you small, you can put that story down. You can. You do not have to keep it. You do not have to trade it for revenge either. You can trade it for the truth. And then you can go home and bake your own cake." We cut the cake at 8:45. Olivia took the first slice. Lisa took the second. Aunt Coretta took the third. My mother took the fourth. My father took the fifth. We ate quietly. Edith Patterson left first, kissing me on the cheek at the door. Faye Mercer followed. Earl and Geraldine Pomeroy. Dale and Geneva Norwood. Lewis, who hugged my father and stayed an extra 10 minutes. Aunt Coretta, who hugged Lisi and whispered something into the top of her hair that Lisi later said was, "Your grandmother loves you in her own broken way. You are not responsible for fixing it." By 10, the house was quiet. Mark put Noah to bed in the guest room. Lisa fell asleep in the small bedroom with the piano, the tablet again at her side, again with her hand on it. Olivia took the old bedroom across the hall. My mother and I washed the dishes together. She washed. I dried. We did not speak for the first 20 minutes. She handed me each plate without looking at me, the way she had handed me plates when I was 12, and I dried each plate without looking at her, the way I had dried plates when I was 12, and the soap smelled the same it had smelled when I was 12. And we did not say a single word for 20 minutes. Finally, she turned the water off. She dried her hands on a dish towel. She did not turn to face me. She said, looking at the kitchen window where the porch light was on, "Martha, I am still not going to call you next month." I said, "I know, Mom." She said, "I am not going to remember Lisa's piano recital in the spring. I'm not going to call Noah on his birthday in February. I am too old and too tired to learn how to be a different kind of grandmother than the one I have been." I said, "I know, Mom." She said, "But if your daughter ever asks me again to play a message at this table, I will say yes. You tell her that." I said, "I will." She turned. She looked at me for the first time since we had started the dishes. Her eyes were wet, although she did not let any of it fall. She said, "Your daughter is a quiet child. So were you. The quiet ones see everything." I should have known better. I said, "Mom, thank you for the cake." She said, It was the cake I used to make for your birthdays, Martha. I do not know if you remembered. I said I remembered. She turned the dish towel over in her hands and folded it once, and set it on the counter and went toward the doorway. She paused, with one hand on the frame. She said, without turning around, "Your daughter played the slow part of Claire de Lune tonight at the piano, in your old bedroom. I was washing flour off my forearms when she started. I stood at the sink for the entire 16 bars. I had forgotten that song existed." She went up the stairs and into her own bedroom and shut the door. I stood in the kitchen for a few more minutes after she went up. The radiator clicked. The dishes were dry on the rack. Out the back window, the same crooked maple was throwing a slow shadow across the same back lawn it had thrown a shadow across when I was 9 years old, when I had baked the same lemon blueberry cake at the same counter, when this same woman had told me to fold the batter and not to stir it when none of this was yet broken. We left the next morning. My father stood on the porch in the same cardigan and watched us load the car. He did not come down the steps. He waved once when Mark started the engine. Lisa waved back through the rear window. Olivia hugged me at the car for a long time and asked if she could come visit us in Maryland on her fall break from Brown. I said yes. She got into her own little car and drove home to the apartment a friend had helped her get the previous month. She has texted me twice since, once to tell me her roommate's name is Priya, and that Priya is from Chicago, and that Priya cried when Olivia gave her the 4 small parcels wrapped in brown paper with a child's careful printing on top. The second text said only, "Aunt Martha, please tell Lisey her cousin Olivia thinks she is the bravest kid in the family. Tell her I said so out loud." I read the second text 3 times before I forwarded it to Lisa. Cordelia did not call. She has not called. She has written 1 letter, though, in her own handwriting, 3 weeks after the birthday. My mother let me read it before deciding. It was not enough. The word sorry did not appear in it. The phrase, "I lied," did not appear in it. My mother handed it back to her sister at the front door, said, "Try again," and shut the door. We are not waiting. About 20 minutes south of New Haven, somewhere on I-95, Lisa was looking out the back window. She had the 4 brown paper packages in her lap. Olivia had handed them to her in the morning and said, "These are yours, Lisa. Do whatever you want with them." Lisa looked up. She said, "Mommy, I want to give these to Olivia's freshman roommate at Brown." I turned around in my seat. I said, "Why, baby?" She said, "Because they're nice things. And they were never really mine. And the roommate is going to be far from home. And nobody knows her yet. So maybe she could have something that says somebody is thinking about her. From me and from Olivia." Mark, who was driving, reached over and squeezed my knee once. I said, "Yes, baby, that is exactly what we will do." She nodded. She turned back to the window. We stopped trying to be loved by them. We started letting them be honest instead. And Lisa, at 9 years old, on the drive back south with 4 returned gifts in her lap, taught me which one of those things is actually the gift.